Although the statute itself makes no mention of athletics, Title IX is historically known for increasing gender equality in high school and collegiate athletics. In fact, early lobbying efforts to enact Title IX were based on college athletics. But college athletics is not all Title IX applies to. Let's begin with the statute itself. No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So Title IX specifically prohibits gender discrimination in education institutions. As long as those education institutions receive federal funding, they must comply. That amounts to about 14,000 public school districts and more than 7,000 institutions of higher learning who must comply with Title IX. Now, an education activity or program encompasses every single aspect of education, including course offerings, counseling, financial assistance, student health services, housing, and athletics. The enforcement of Title IX is overseen by the Office for Civil Rights, otherwise known as OCR, which is a sub-agency of the U.S. Department of Education. Under the Obama administration in 2011, OCR issued a number of guidance documents to all colleges and universities across the country to increase awareness and vigilance in addressing the issue of campus sexual harassment and sexual assault. Sexual harassment and sexual assault were viewed as a form of sex discrimination, prohibited by Title IX. Over the last decade, Title IX has largely been focused on eradicating sexual misconduct on campuses. So today, we are focused on the formal rulemaking process that the Department of Education is engaging in to make proposed changes to how Title IX is enforced on educational campuses across the country. Here is what the rulemaking process entails and where the Department of Education currently is in that process. You'll see from the slide that public comment period just ended earlier this week on September 12th. Now, the department is going to review those comments that were received during that period, which is generally 60 days, and incorporate the comments into a final rule. Now, the Department of Education has been granted rulemaking authority by Congress to issue regulations effectuating Title IX. While Title IX has been in place for 50 years, it's notable that the department has only engaged in the formal rulemaking process 3 times. This year marks the 3rd time. This is also only the 2nd time the department has issued regulations addressing sexual misconduct specifically. The first time was in 2020 under the Trump administration. So how has the department enforced Title IX all these years? Through guidance documents. Periodically, the department has issued guidance documents which were not legally binding and did not have the force of law to direct schools on how to address sexual misconduct. As we discussed a moment ago, any school that receives federal funding must adhere to Title IX. If a school fails to do so, they risk the loss of millions of dollars of federal funding. So, even though the department's guidance documents over the years were not legally binding, no school was going to risk violating the guidance documents and in turn losing such vital federal funding. Title IX is codified in the Code of Federal Regulations at 34 CFR Part 106. For comparison purposes, when the department went through the formal rulemaking process under the Trump administration, the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking was published on November 29, 2018, and during the public comment period, the department received over 125,000 comments. The hot topic for the proposed rulemaking then was the installation of due process rights for those accused of sexual misconduct. The department took over 1 year to review the comments and published a final rule in August of 2020. Now, under the Biden administration, the notice of proposed rulemaking was officially published in the Federal Register on July 12, 2022. Notice and comment period was open for 60 days, and as I mentioned, had just closed on September 12th. Over 235,000 comments were submitted. That's over 100,000 more than the last administration received. Hot topics include gender identity and due process. It's unclear how long the department will take to review all the comments, although sources claim that it will not take as long as the last administration.